Greetings, welcome back to the Black Pill. Let's talk about public prayer and freedom of and from religion. Item one. Why make this the first item in the Bill of Rights, the Establishment Clause of the Bill of Rights? I spent a long time enthralled with Alec Reary's series on the origins of Protestant religion in England and Europe. You can catch that over on the Gresham College site here on the YouTube. The too long didn't read on it seems to be this: having a state religion in England resulted in 400 years of civil war over religion, with the British English government going back and forth between Catholicism and Protestantism, and trying to impose that on people, and getting war as a result. The American founders, the signers of the Declaration of Independence and the people who drafted and signed the first forms of the Constitution, they were very much concerned with tyranny. And they saw religion as a means by which to tyrannize people. It's not at all clear that the founders my generation heard about in school as pilgrims, um, the origin story of the US, the only settling that happened at Plymouth Rock, that's what we heard about. It's not at all clear that those Mayflower colonists actually came in search of religious freedom. Getting deeper into that history, it seems they were really looking to found a theocracy, but their theocracy instead of the Church of England or Catholic theocracy. Um, they were more or less exiled from England. I mean, not formally with a declaration, but they were pretty much exiled from England for their puritanical views. And they started to set up minority rule on the Mayflower. They were outnumbered on that vessel and imposed prayer and prayer meetings and religious ordinances on the ship itself. But they weren't our only settlers. They weren't the only settlers. Our origins are tobacco farming. They were plantations. Bear in mind that the thing being planted in plantation isn't the crop; it's the aristocracy that owns the farm. Feudal culture. Our origins are resource mining, fur trappers, hunters, loggers, gold miners. Our origins are war and capitalism, especially New York. Thousands and thousands of people coming from the depleted European countries to make some fortune here because there was no fortune to be made where they came from. Don't forget that Spanish has always been spoken here since before there were states, right? As long as there have been settlements, uh, the very difficult and problematic history of the first people, the first settlers who didn't speak English or Spanish. But as long as people have been coming to the New World, um, Spanish Spanish has been spoken here. We're talking about Spanish cowboys in Florida. We're talking about um, much of the American West and Southwest was was Mexico, was ceded by Mexico to the United States for various reasons. Also, the French had a hand in our establishment, both as colonists, visit the Bayou someday, and with material support during the American Revolution. When it came to unite all of these diverse people into one nation, again leaving out the first people, when it came to unite, religion was not really considered a unifying thing. There's a lot of discussion about it, but religion is too divisive and it's not worth going to war over. Arguably, from the very beginning, they rallied around race, um, which in those days really meant English origins. It didn't mean black skin or white skin. That evolved over time, and it certainly means that now. Um, but arguably, they meant that free people would be free men, which would be land holding men, which would be people with land grants from the English. Yeah. And they rallied around sex. When someone defends old sexist language, when someone says man in 1950, they're supposed to have meant man as mankind as humankind. Just remember that women didn't have the right to vote until 1920. So man means man. Um, it's an absolute in America. No one can tell you whom or whether to or how to worship. Religion is not a matter for government. It's much too dangerous. 400 years of civil war. Item 2, prayer in school. Children can pray privately. Pray all you want. Prayer groups tend not to be permitted in public schools, and teachers can't lead public prayers. They're permitted to teach about religion, um, but not to favor a given religion. If you're going to teach about Christianity as a subject, you need to also teach about Islam and Buddhism and Hindu and Sikh and so forth. The major world religions have to be in there. Judaism. Taxes in various forms pay for public education. Public education is a public good. Religion in school is against the Establishment Clause, item 1 of the Bill of Rights. Using tax money to endorse a given religion is unconstitutional. Even implying support for one religion can be damaging to that end. The long history of freedom from religion, it really only starts in this context in 1962. The landmark case is 1962. This is Engel versus Vitale, in which the New York Board of Regents recommended schools open every day with a brief prayer. They wrote a non-denominational prayer, and the Union Free School District in New York State adopted that prayer and had teachers lead their students in this brief non-denominational prayer. A number of parents sued and lost. They lost in the district court, they lost in the state court, they lost in the state Supreme Court. They got to SCOTUS. And they won the case in a 6-1 decision. 2 jurors declined to participate, and there's a link. There's a link to a place that follows this stuff, and you can read more about it there. In this case, the school district said students were free not to participate. If they had a note from their parents, then they would not have to participate in the prayer in the classroom. The jurors, the Supreme Court disagreed that the ability to opt out meant that this did not violate the Establishment Clause. Now, I'm from a country where that's exactly the state of affairs. Teachers, masters, headmasters lead prayer in assembly every day, and we're forced to sing hymns, and if we don't sing or don't sing loud enough, they can hit us with sticks. And but if you're a Jehovah's Witness, you can provide a letter. You don't have to go to the religious assembly. So just put a pin in that, as they say, and we'll wrap back around to there later. So it's been a goal of the authoritarian right for a long time to get fundamentalist religion back into schools and other public life. Really, by any means necessary. This includes like caveats on science textbooks and lying about creationism to claim that it is science, intelligent design, right? Equally valid to biology, it's not. Adding under God to the Pledge of Allegiance in 1954. Allowing judges to mandate attendance in Alcoholics Anonymous. AA is church. There it is. Higher power. It never mentions God. No, but it's the higher power is God. It's a thinly veiled church, and so on and so forth. So, some definition of terms here. A conservative is a person who resists change. The 1962 ruling is foundational to dozens of other rulings by now, and a conservative would be really loath to upset case law and precedent. They want to maintain the status quo. That's what conservative means. I mean, words change meanings, and now you use conservative to mean something different. Nowadays, when you say conservative, you actually mean reactionary. A reactionary is someone who seeks to undo change. When same sex marriage is the law of the land, the conservative defends it, but the reactionary seeks to take us back in time. The current Supreme Court of the United States has been referred to as conservative, but that's a misnomer. They're not conservatives, they're Republicans. That's the problem, is they vote a party line. They don't seek to maintain any status quo. They're activist judges bent on restoring a slavery era version of the American government when people of color had no rights the government was bound to uphold, Dred Scott. When women couldn't vote, when gay people could just be hung, when transgenderism wasn't even a question. I've done a longer piece on this, and I'll try and remember to link it in the sort of down below parts. As such, in addition to overturning Roe versus Wade, 50 years of precedent, they ruled recently that a football coach was permitted to pray on the sidelines. And it was wrong of the school to fire the coach for praying on their time. If students wanted to pray with him, that was their own business. And so there's that. So there's a gray area here. There's a lot of gray area. When the Supreme Court rules, they set a precedent which lower courts are bound to honor. Thus, only very shaded questions can't even make it really to the Supreme Court in the first place. And the Supreme Court tends to reject most cases because they really were properly ruled upon according to precedent. But this opens a door for the grayer areas. It's no longer accepted. This ruling opens a door for the grayer area. It's no longer accepted as an absolute that teachers cannot lead their students in prayer. Item 3, love it or leave it. So why can't the teacher lead a prayer and excuse any students who have notes from their parents? If the coach is praying and some students want to join, are they not free to do so? Where's the harm? I served with no particular distinction in the United States Air Force from 1992 to 1996. The Air Force tries to make you Christian by unfair means. Man, talk to some academy graduates. It's even heavier at the officer level. I was just an enlisted guy. I mean that in basic military training, there's church on Sundays. You don't have to go. You don't have to go to church on Sunday. But the alternative is to remain in the barracks, and the barracks are oppressive. Dude, watch any basic military training movie. Your one and only chance to get away for a minute is to go to church on Sunday. There's one day of liberty, another thing. You get that when you're ready to graduate. And otherwise, it's church on Sunday. Not only that, but Sunday is a GI party. That is toothbrushing the grout and scrubbing the toilet bowls and getting behind the light fixtures and all of that. So nobody says if you don't go to church, then you stay behind and GI party the barracks. But the choice is there and you make it. Like 7 Sundays I stayed and did the GI party, and then one Sunday I caved and went, even though I was not a believer, and went just to get out for a minute. I caved to pressure. That's what they want. The church is non-denominational. That means that there are chaplains from various religions, but none of the chaplains are atheists. You can get a sermon this week from a rabbi, and next week from a priest, and the week after that from a pastor, and the week after from a minister. There'll be never a rousing motivational speech from a non-believer not referencing God. You can choose not to go, but you will be punished for not going. That's adults. What about children? In the 1962 case, children needed a note from their parents. This meant the default position was a religious one. We could just assume everyone wanted to pray and make other people's children pray unless they specifically sought an exemption. This doesn't work in other bits and pieces of public life, not in America. For example, we could assume everyone's an organ donor unless they specifically say while they're applying for their driver's license, please exclude me from the organ donation program. Other nations do that and have far more access to life-saving organs. But we are on the side of believing in informed, affirmative consent. You have to opt in, not out. More, there are consequences for opting out. I'm British. Again, in England, the Queen is the head of the Church of England. And all the institutions are Anglican institutions. There's no argument about prayer in public spaces. My high school graduation was in a church with organ music and hymns, and we were expected to sing the hymns. Children's parents could opt them out of singing hymns at assembly. Doing so, though, was costly. Those children, usually Jehovah's Witnesses, were seen as oddities or strangers. Nobody really enjoyed praying or singing the hymns, but being outside of that shared suffering was alienating. Those people were identifiable as different. Imagine a football team. Imagine a football team needs some level of cohesion. People have to get along to get to the team performance. Now imagine all but 2 members of that team participate in prayers. Do we trust the majority to respect the minority and treat them as equals? Man, given our biology and history, that is not a reasonable position. Sorry. What if coach decided to leave those 2 on the bench and advance a newer player who had participated in prayer? Can we trust that that's not a discriminatory decision? Again, given our biology and our history, as our society becomes increasingly fascist, do we want to keep creating public events where people have to identify their religious beliefs or political ideology? Because there is a cost for being in a minority. Who sits for the Pledge of Allegiance? We can identify and harass them. Man, talk to some conscientious objectors. Talk to Colin Kaepernick. Find out what his life is like. Maybe you're an Air Force captain coming up for majors boards. At this month's Hail and Farewell, the unit commander asks you to lead an opening prayer, but you're an atheist. Do you tell the colonel that's not your bag? Do you go further and object to the practice of opening government-sponsored events with prayers? Or is there a certain amount of social pressure, political pressure, economic pressure to go along? That's the point of pushing prayer in school. This isn't about freedom of religion. It's about freedom from religion, from the establishment of religion, from forced or coerced participation in religion. They, the reactionaries, the fundamentalists, want to mix up religion, education, and government. It is not at its base about a teacher's right to pray privately and participate in the religion of their choice. It's about the teacher's obligation to very carefully respect the agency, freedom of their students, and to refrain from influencing students in that manner. There's room for gray here. Again, it doesn't make it to the Supreme Court unless it's in a gray area. But the law tends to come down in favor of protecting minorities, at least intellectual minorities. The right to be a Nazi, for example, is protected very strongly because it is so repulsive that public pressure might tend to stampede someone's rights to ugly speech and ugly thought. Sometimes what seems like ugly speech is really needed speech. A suffragette in the 1900s South might be very unpopular and might seem as ugly as a Nazi in her day. The people, abolitionists, wanting to upset the entire social order of the South would seem very ugly in their day. And such people need a lot of protection. They turn out to be right. They're steering us toward justice, toward not just individual liberty, but the broadening of who qualifies for liberty. It is difficult to imagine a world in which a racist parade leads toward justice. Ugh, I hate Illinois Nazis. But it's very easy to imagine one in which government intervention leads toward injustice, violence, and a reactive police state. When everyone in a school is one kind of Christian and one student is not, that is exactly the time to take the most care to protect their individual rights, their individual civil liberties over the rights of the majority. The majority is in no danger of being coerced out of their faith. The minority is in danger of being coerced into it. This has been The Black Pill. I don't know why you watch this stuff. See you next time.